We are watching IDF aerial footage over the Israeli forces entering their own kibbutzim and opening tank fire upon the houses that also, alongside Palestinian militants, featured hostages. These houses were blown up by the Israeli tanks.
All right, as we just reported a few moments ago, just got word from the IDF that the Israeli military says it has mistakenly killed 3 Israeli hostages during its ground operation in the Gaza Strip.
For the families of those hostages accidentally killed by Israeli troops, there is more than anguish, there is outrage too.
I'm really angry. I asked the government stop the shooting, and look what's happened.
We're going to talk about
the family members of these 3 Israeli hostages who were killed. What do they think? I had the opportunity today to speak with 2 of them, the families of both Alon Shamriz and Samer Talalka as well. We were down in the south of Israel. We were in central Israel. The signs that you're showing, the signs that said SOS and help hostages, Alon Shamriz's father, Avi, told me that he recognized his son's handwriting, that his son wrote those. Here's what else he said. What is your message to the government? What is your message to the prime minister? What is your message to a country that knows your son's name now?
I'm going to say this government, you murdered my son twice. You let the Hamas take my son on October 7th, and you killed my son on December 14th. They cannot serve us. They don't deserve us as a country, as a community. They are not our leaders. They're thinking only on themselves, on their chairs, on their salaries. They are not thinking about the hostages. They are not thinking about us.
His frustration, his pain, just so palpable there, Garrett, as was the pain of Leila Talalka, Samer's mother. She was, you just saw there, Alon Shamriz's father sitting Shiva. She was welcoming visitors to her home, including an Israeli politician who came to offer condolences. She rejected those condolences. And while we were there, she told him, and we happened to watch it as we were sitting in her living room, as she was on her couch greeting people, she said, I will never forgive anyone on this. She said, I hold out hope for hostages, for other people's hostages, but I have no hope left myself because her son is gone.
Well, I mean, HasanAbi called it. They ended up killing hostages, and now no one will be on their side. Literally called it yesterday. I mean, I think that it's the starting point. It's the beginning of the end. In order to cover their butts, mainstream media is going to start plagiarizing Haaretz 90 days after the fact. Speaking of Haaretz and Channel 12, I think there was another video that I just saw with the tank shelling one of the kibbutzim, which we knew was a likelihood. This still does not mean that like the Israeli occupying force killed its own civilians by the hundreds, but it certainly does require Arma 3. I don't know. I haven't verified the footage. I've only simply seen it scroll past my timeline, but I believe it was Channel 12 that posted it. So. But once again, it does not change, It does not change the dynamic. It does not change that the overwhelming majority of the deaths were still from Hamas and other Palestinian militants. As a pro-Palestine Jew, it's so refreshing to hear someone not downplay that October 7th was also bad and distinguish between analysis and justification. Yeah, unfortunately, well, the reason why people, I mean, I'm of course going to do that, because it's, I have consistent principles on this matter. The problem, however, is that most people don't see it and don't really care about it, and will just go, you're against the Israeli occupation, you're against the apartheid, which means you're anti-Semitic. You. What I see in Be'eri is smoke in the northern area. For the first time since October 7, we get a chance to see.
אנחנו מקבלים הזדמנות נדירה לראות מלמעלה את הטרגדיה של קיבוץ בארי. כפי שהכוחות ותושבי הקיבוץ
from above, the same way the citizens and security forces did at the time.
בשעה 4:20 אחר הצהריים.
At 4:20 p.m., 9 hours after hundreds of vandals stormed Be'eri, entire neighborhoods were burning.
אחרי שחדרו לבארי מאות מחבלים. שכונות שלמות בקיבוץ עולות באש.
אני צופה עכשיו על
I'm watching now from above Be'eri to the north. I see smoke in the north, west to the cemetery. Are there burnt houses there? Yes, yes. This documentation reveals the intensity of the fighting and the unbelievable number of vandals who took control of the town. It is documented that the tank was aiding the forces at the house of Pessi, and it targeted the house. Suddenly, they brought a tank, and I said to a soldier, tell me, did you shell the house? Did the hostages get hurt? I think that might be Yasmin Parat speaking there. I can't tell, but this was her testimony as well about the tank shelling in Kibbutz Be'eri that she watched from afar. She watched from above a hilltop. He said, we are only targeting the side of the walls and houses to demolish them. This makes the work of the IDF and special forces look stranger because every house had 15 hostages inside. Seeing a tank entering Be'eri and walking on the street, there it is. There was shelling. Oh my God. Suddenly a strong explosion sound and I can't move my leg. A tank here. It was completely clear to me I was hit and I had a shrapnel from the tank. The new documentation reveals how Passi's house was shelled at 5:30. 1 hour and a half after the forces reached the area, the forces who were there said it was a warning shot. Then a tank was hit. Then another tank came to fulfill the mission. They're shooting there. Wow. In this documentation, we see clear scenes of another failure that we unveiled. A large number of forces were waiting at the entrance of to Be'eri several hours after noon, and they did not enter the town. These vehicles were documented at 4:30 p.m. on Saturday during the most intense time of fighting in the town. They were lining from 232 Street until the yellow entrance of the town. At 6:10 p.m., I saw a large number of soldiers, dozens of vehicles of border guards and others. This is the most cop-like army we've ever seen. I mean, it is. They are cops. Yes, that's the point. They are cop-like. We are watching IDF aerial footage over the Israeli forces entering their own kibbutzim and opening tank fire upon the houses that also, alongside Palestinian militants, featured hostages. These houses were blown up by the Israeli tanks. Israeli tanks that might have been operated by people who were not very familiar, or even tanks operated by actual, veteran tank operatives, I guess. Now, in that circumstance, of course, just like with the helicopter fire that hit cars traveling in and out of Gaza, okay, that was unleashed upon cars traveling in and out of Gaza near the Nova Festival. There are, of course, casualties of Israeli civilians that the Israeli military itself ended up killing. But given the number of civilian casualties, the many videos that are readily available from October 7th and the military operations, it is, by my estimation, still the majority of the civilians killed were not killed by the IDF, but instead by Palestinian militants and maybe even criminal elements that also went through the border wall that was opened up. I want people to understand that it's copium to say that this is not the case. It's copium to say that, like, oh yeah, no, it's just IDF killed all the civilians and all of the Hamas and all of the Palestinian militancy, like, on October 7th were... You always have to do this when we talk about Israel kills their own. No, not always. But this is one instance that deserves clarity, in my opinion.
זה פשוט סדק של מאות חיילים, מאות, עשרות מכוניות מג"ב ואחרים,
Do I believe that Hamas is a better civilian to military member ratio? Yes. Like October 7 in comparison to the 70 plus days that have passed since October 7, undeniable that Israel's targeting of a civilian population is significantly worse. 100%. And that has always been the case. That asymmetry of violence always benefits the colonizing power, the colonial power. Israel is the militarized state with a nuke, multiple nukes. Like, it's not even a conversation. By the way, yeah, this does, I hate to say I told you so, but this does absolutely support my theory that Israel is fine with blowing up buildings with their own people inside if there also happens to be Palestinians there also. Why do you ignore the analysis of more well-read people on this? Wait, what? I like you criticizing IDF, but you push back against people that said IDF killed most of their civilians. I still push back against people that say IDF killed most of their civilians on October 7. And also, the idea that I ignore the analysis of more well-read people on this is just completely incorrect. John Mersheimer and Scott Ritter. Yeah, I disagree with John Mersheimer on so much and always avoid him famously. Scott Ritter is a different story. You continue to ignore evidence in front of you to do the condemn Hamas, but every time it's just funny at this point. The evidence in front of me, what are you talking about? Do you think I've denied that Israel had absolutely killed their own civilians on October 7? Of course not. There's not a point where I literally said Israel has definitely not killed their own civilians. I said there is a very high likelihood that Israel killed its own civilians on October 7. This does not mean that Israel killed all of the civilians on October 7, not even a majority in my opinion. The civilians I'm talking about. There was a shit ton of friendly fire on October 7. These guys are hilariously overwhelmed and underprepared. Something that I have consistently spoken about on over the course of the past 2 weeks. 2 months. The issue in the circumstance is twofold. I don't think that if Hamas killed all 800 or all 1,200 people themselves, or whether Israel killed a certain amount of it and Hamas killed a certain amount, this changes my mathematics of the equation, that Israel's actions after October 7 are somehow justifiable. It is not. That's my point. I don't need Hamas to be perfect vessels of revolution or whatever the people try to fantasize them as. I believe Palestinian emancipation is moral and just. I also believe that Hamas, which has historically engaged in acts of terror upon a civilian population by deliberately targeting a civilian population, as they did on October 7th, is simply an expression of Palestinian emancipation and would be replaced by another group if it did not exist. They might not be Islamists. They might not target civilians at all, another group I mean. But that still doesn't change the equation for me. The dynamics, like my opinion on Palestinian emancipation is not conditional that they are perfect victims. My opinion on Palestinian emancipation does not rely on them retaliating in only nonviolent ways that I find permissible. So there's two different things that I believe here that I think people are missing the point on. This is why I said October 7th is an act of terror and absolutely qualifies for it due to the majority civilian casualties and the personal nature of this violence as well. It's not like lobbing bombs and accidentally hitting a kindergarten or some shit because they have conventional weapons and they are doing their very best to retaliate against the Israeli government like they do normally when they lob missiles into Israel. They went in, they had guns, and they shot a bunch of civilians. It's that simple. Hundreds of civilians died. This does not change the dynamic within Israel's maintenance of the apartheid, which is completely unacceptable, and it certainly doesn't change the dynamic of Israel retaliating in the way that it has. I'm sorry, but how do you know they actually shot civilians directly? Brother, there is a lot of footage readily available. You know what I mean? It was a carnage. I don't know why people act like this is not the case. Like, I mean, is it, on the day of, it was readily available. From what sources? Literally Hamas Telegram channels, man. I know that there is plenty of things that are not on camera, that there's no video evidence for, and Israel regularly tries to recycle like as many narratives as possible about how like these guys are all barbarian monsters, they're gang rapists, and they are definitely doing gang rape, and they're beheading babies. Like they were going around chopping up babies' heads and shit and throwing them in ovens and then eating the baby and then high-fiving each other as they were eating the baby. And one of them said, "Ice cream so good. Yes, yes, yes. Gang, gang." There's a lot of psycho shit that's out there, but it's not psychotic and made up to say that they fucking shot at civilians, dude. They threw grenades inside of fucking houses where there were civilians. I mean, I saw it. I saw it with my own two fucking eyes. Like, I don't know what do you mean? They shot indiscriminately at toilets, like porta potties at the Nova Festival, like mass shooters do. There's no tactical reason for that. They were high on the dabbing drug. They were high on some other drugs, probably Copsalon, or not Copsalon. What is it called? Copsalon is the Captagon. Copsalon is the Surinamese food, which is very good. From 4 days ago, 695 civilians, including 32 under 18, 20 under 15, definitely not 40 babies. No, I know. They are updating the numbers and stuff like that, for sure. Copsalon is not Surinamese, wasn't it? Wait, oh shit, sorry, it wasn't Surinamese, it's Dutch. My bad. Anyway, let's continue. Soldiers were all fully armed. I went to each officer I saw until the one with the highest rank and asked about the one who led the operation.
מרב סרן ושאלתי אותו מי מנהל האירוע, מי מפקד באירוע, והוא עבר, אמר לי לא, אני רק מפקד על 5,000.
He answered, I'm only responsible for those 5. So I went to another officer who told me that he was responsible for only those 10. Every officer I asked about, the one in charge, didn't know the answer. It was a horrible leadership failure. I told them that there was a fight there inside and families were being killed. We should get in, but no one listened to me. When we got out, I yelled at all the soldiers and said, who will go back to Be'eri? When we got out, I yelled at all the soldiers and said, who will go back to Be'eri? I approached each one of them and I said, doesn't make sense that you are standing here. People were calling for help and they were all standing. No one speaks. No one says, I will. 500 soldiers were standing outside. They were organized with canines and fully equipped. With all this protection and those vehicles, they were just standing outside and not doing anything. Pull the children from burning shelters, the elderlies. With every minute, people were losing blood. In the army, it was nothing. Just standing outside, not knowing anything. It seems like Israel did a Uvalde at first, and then very quickly swapped it from Uvalde to the Hannibal directive. Those days, the army is busy fighting in Gaza, and the important investigations into the failure on October 7 have not started yet. This is a documentation of the Black Saturday, but 2 months after it, the citizens of Be'eri, as well as citizens of Gaza envelope, deserve to get answers about what happened. There was a leadership problem. The fighting spirit and the impulsive towards the goals were all missing there. When we had to push the soldiers inside the town, only a few forces entered. If there was a problem inside and we were fighting alone the entire time, it's like, bro, dude, I mean, you see how they operate in Gaza. They don't get out of the Merkavas. They don't want to die. They're scared. That's it. So they go in with the tanks and they deal with the matter in the only way they know, which is by using the tanks. I mean, this is like the asymmetry of force displayed on October 7 in this regard is literally identical to the Israeli modus operandi in general. That's what you see in Gaza too. They blow up entire city blocks and then push through the rubble with tanks without any infantry support whatsoever. That's just how it is. It's because they place a lot of value in each individual soldier, and that's kind of not how armies are supposed to operate. The whole point is like you're a fucking machine, you know what I mean? You're supposed to be sending units into the path of bloodshed. Like bullets are hailing towards you, and you're supposed to be fucking hopped up on whatever kind of drugs you have, whatever kind of go juice is out there, whatever the Israeli go juice is, and you're supposed to just like rush in. Go juice, something real. Feel dumb asking. For the American military, yes. For pilots, is modafinil, but that doesn't really give a hide. Let's just stay up for 72 hours. The shortcomings of the IDF come from them being considered an elite force, while not being an elite force is absolutely correct, by the way. They are considered an elite force when they're not, and also incredibly arrogant in the way that they have operated for, a captured population that they can't necessarily fight against, or that can't fight against them for the most part. That's where that shit comes from. Like, when you're so used to sniping grandmas and shit, and not even like directly sniping them, but using a drone sniper, like, holy shit. How much do you have to depersonalize your troops at that point? When you're too used to sniping a civilian population, and that's what you know, or doing like occupying force maintenance in, like, again, in the West Bank with like kids who throw rocks and shit, then yeah, you're gonna not want to literally go into actual active battle with a guerrilla force with AK-47s. Uvalde is a great example of this. That's what the police do. Cops are just like, I don't want to go in there, I'll die. It's the most normal human consideration to have.